Maybe if you could get my other phone and I could. All right, guys, I'm live. Sorry. I had a couple of hiccups here to get started, but I am ready to go. I'm trying to get my questions in front of me for you guys, but I have a list of things I want to go through before I ever start. That I made some notes here on my my phone that I'm going to use to address this issue. And it's a big issue, what we're going to talk about today. And it is really talking about this positive only science-based dog training lie. And it is a lie. It's a complete lie. It's a complete fallacy. And I want to expose it because it's dangerous. It's dangerous for dogs. It's dangerous for people. It's dangerous for society. And you don't really understand how dangerous it is because it seems so benign on the surface, right? I also want to tell you before I get started, I've had a nasty cold. I almost tried to cancel this live because I lost my voice yesterday. I had a sore throat, a runny nose. I've got some tissues here. I might be taking a quick couple breaks to do that. Got my chloroseptic and some Ricola cough drops to try to make it through. But this is so important that I want to address it. I didn't want to let it go. Recently, I engaged a really well-known dog trainer on YouTube called Zak George. And people thought it was stupid to engage him because what am I going to benefit from it? And the issue isn't really what do I benefit from it, it's why do I do it? And the reason I got into dog training was because my veterinarian, a licensed veterinarian, a real veterinarian, told me I should be a dog trainer. I was kind of just working with dogs at the shelter. I had helped a friend of mine train his dog. I never wanted to be a professional dog trainer, to be honest with you. And I got into this because I was advocating for dogs. I had an organization for over 10 years called Bound Angels. And for more than 12 plus whatever, maybe 15, I don't know what it was, years, I worked in the LA City shelters. I worked with the LA City shelters, I should say. And I would go there and I would handle dogs. I would work programs. I started their playgroup program. I did playgroups before they ever did playgroups there. I had dogs in small groups running around. I rehabilitated dogs that I took out of there and placed into homes. I did this because I love dogs. And the reason I engage in this conversation is because I love dogs. Now, Zach says, oh, I lost so many people. Every time I do this, I lose people. Well, I know where they're going. They're over here because I gained several thousand people on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram since doing this. Now, that's not the reason why I did it, but it's a nice little piece. I never criticized Zach for wanting to make money. I make money. I make a good living doing what I do. I'm very proud of that. I think everybody's entitled to make a living. But this positive only, and I'm going to really get into this today before I start taking any questions, and I hope I can make it through and get some questions. I'm going to have Janet hand me the questions today. I'm not really going to look at them because I can't. My screens are all screwed up here today. I want to tell you why it's a cult. First of all, a cult is and I put the definition up when somebody criticized me on it. And if somebody wants to look up the definition of cult, you can post it here. But it's a one-sided belief in something with usually a person or a leader at its head. And this cult of dog training, called R+, positive only, force-free, whatever you want to call it, is so dangerous because of the lies it tells. And the lies include things like, we don't use any aversive on dogs, and such. But let me talk to you about, first of all, this dangerous kind of political type agenda, right? Because what it does, it ostracizes anyone else. In other words, if I say, well, I'm a positive only trainer, what kind of trainer are you? Well, I have to say, well, I guess I'm not positive only, right? Because unless I claim to be a positive only trainer, unless I claim to never correct a dog, to never put any pressure on a dog, to never be aversive to a dog, I'm a bully, right? And that is what happens in this. The way this started with Zach is he posted a question on his page, and it came on my thread because I rarely will post on anybody else's pages because I'm just don't care and I'm too busy. And it was No, I think it was something like no agenda or no, I'm not going to criticize you or something like that. Do you use choke chains, prong collars, and e-collars? And I said, yeah, I use them all the time to help dogs when they can't learn from other things. And, I kind of got into my little spiel of how I think it's dangerous to get rid of them or whatever. And man, people, the positive only crowd is anything but positive only when it comes to interacting with people, kind of like, vegans and other people like this. They get so angry. And I was attacked so much, and I don't care personally, but just the violent anger that came from them. I answered an honest question. Yeah, I use them. Right. Then the question started. No judgment. That's what he said. No judgment. But there was a ton of judgment that came. Thank you, Alan, for texting me that. There was a ton of judgment that came with it, and that's always the little hook. That's always the way they get you. Well, just tell me the truth and I won't be mad. Tell me the truth. I won't judge you. And then it's a barrage of judgment. So I answered his question really, really honestly. And one of the questions he asked me was, do I think I know better than behaviorists? And I answered that question honestly. I'm going to get into that. Here's the thing. Let's look at a lot of these things that when we talk about studies, and I'm going to get into the science of dog training and all that, so the scientific argument as well. But one of the things that he cited in his retort was how bears are taught through positive association that they can take an injection without being subdued, and it was less stress for them to learn the positive association and then getting the injections, and how orcas are trained, and how gorillas are trained. Let me tell you something. And this is my argument when people say, oh, the positive-only training, force-free training, which SeaWorld claims, and if you watch a movie called Blackfish, you'll see much the other side. Positive training is anything but positive only. There are aversives in positive only. And I'm going to break that down as well today. I'm going to tell you about all these lies. But, when people train lions, first of all, they're not trained positive only, because a lion will kill you. A gorilla will kill you. An orca will kill you. And I posted the video of Tilikum, the orca that killed that poor trainer at SeaWorld, as well as there's tons of other stories of killer whales and dolphins and everything that have injured trainers by using positive only training, by using what they call negative reward, right? Which means you withhold the reward. And withholding a reward, whether it's on a dog or any animal. In fact, I know 2 trainers who got bit extremely seriously, one right in front of my face, by withholding treats from a dog. Dog was dominant. They said sit. They held the treat, and the dog wouldn't do it, and the dog attacked them to get the treat. So don't believe the hype that positive only or not using any compulsion or corrections in dogs is a safer way to do it for people or dogs. And I'll get into that as well. But the issue of animals in captivity, I'm against it, right? I don't like seeing orcas at SeaWorld, lions in the circus, in zoos. I don't go to zoos. I don't go to the circus. I don't do any of that because I'm against it. Furthermore, that's kind of how I feel, and I'll address it a little bit later on in this live as well, about people who cite studies. Studies are skewed, and I'm going to really, really talk about that. This whole movement is about virtue signaling. We're positive, we use clickers, we use treats, we don't use e-collars, we don't do this, we don't hurt dogs, we don't intimidate dogs. And when you want to look at the lie of this, when they say we don't use aversives, what is an aversive? I use aversives. I use aversives every single day in my life, whether it's interacting with my dogs, my wife, my people in life. There are aversives. You're trying to get out the door, you're putting pressure, you get out the door first. You want the dog to move, you stand in front of them, they move. This came out of this idea of LIMA, which was least invasive, minimally aversive. And the person who founded that was actually a speaker at last year's International Association of Canine Professionals, which I'm going to plug them a couple times in this because they're an organization for dog trainers that really doesn't care what your approach is as long as it's humane. If you want to use positive only, great. If you want to use compulsion or coercion or corrections or whatever, fine. But you must be humane and fair to the dog. The positive only lie continues when they're saying, like I said to Zach, I said, if it's positive only, then why would you put a leash and a harness on a dog, right? And well, a harness isn't that aversive. Well, but being that aversive still shows it is aversive. Anytime you put a leash and a collar on a dog, you've already begun the road to aversive training because you're taking away a dog's freedom. When you take away a dog's desire to run and chase a squirrel, you're being aversive. You're stopping that desire in the dog. It's not anything more than trying to condition or recondition or counter-condition a dog to what we want them to do with what is safe, what is desirable, and what is acceptable. So words like hurting dogs, scaring dogs, intimidating dogs are very wrong, and they're very scandalous. And they're cast upon every trainer who will not label themselves as positive only. And that's where the cult mentality comes in. You have this list of people who are positive only, and we're sticking together, and we're in this movement together, and we're going to save the dogs together, and we're going to get rid of all these trainers. And I know somebody said that they've seen it on these other, and I'm going to stop mentioning Zach's name because I really don't care. I really did want to sit down and have a one-on-one chat, dog lover to dog lover, as I've had with Larry Crone, Nino, Frank Phillips, Avi Cohen. I mean, 100 other people who love dogs. And thousands in my life, because I cherish the time of talking about dog training with people. It's my passion. I love it. I mean, I was at a seminar with Frank Phillips last weekend, and I'll be honest with you, we sat up for 3 hours drinking beer, just talking about dogs, dog training, dog loving, dog owning, dog everything. When you want to look at the science-based dog training situation, why does it work, right? Why do people say, well, science says this? Well, we're citing parts of science, right? There are studies that show the negative effects of e-collar use. And I don't deny that there are studies that show the negative sides of e-collar use. However, there are studies that show the benefits of e-collar use as well. Most studies are funded, and most studies are funded by organizations that probably have an agenda. And when you have an agenda, like say, for example, I say, well, I believe e-collars are negative, and I want to prove it in a study. So I will fund a study to prove it. And in that study, more than likely, that study will prove it. If I want to prove that dogs can detect cancer, I'll fund a study to prove it. If I want to fund a study that shows that dogs can detect agricultural things, I'll fund a study to prove it. But we're not addressing the other studies. Now, if you look on my YouTube channel, and maybe I put it on Facebook as well, because we should be live on both channels. Yeah, we actually are. There are a list of other studies that show the non-negative sides of training, of balance training, of using corrections, because dogs learn through corrections. Dogs learn through structure. But when we cite things like science, we say, well, science shows that there are negative fallouts to using corrections in training. Well, there are science that show negative fallouts to using only positives in training. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a great studier of science. I'm not a great scholastic mind. But what I am is a dog trainer. What I am is a person who loves dogs and who has handled very difficult dogs successfully. I'm not going to sit down here and go over studies and studies and studies with you. I can guarantee you that there are studies that show what the positive only people want to show you, the force-free people, and there are studies that show you what every other dog trainer wants to show you. I watched a little bit of the interview with Michael Shikashio and Ivan Balabanov, and I've got to tell you, I gained a very huge amount of respect from Michael. Because now, I will tell you that a lot of the positive-only people went against him. And I saw that in some posts. Somebody said, well, the reason they went against him is because he didn't stick up for himself. Michael, from what I saw on that podcast, is a very well-spoken, very well-experienced person. And he said, I don't want to be labeled as a positive-only person or a balanced person or this person. I'm a dog trainer. And I think that statement right there says a lot. And I think all of us should look at it that we are dog trainers. You're not a positive-only trainer. You're not a balance. If you're a positive-only trainer, in my opinion, you're not a dog trainer. Because in my experience, I've never seen a positive-only trainer accomplish anything worthwhile. I've been around protection sports. I've been around obedience sports. I've been around hunting sports. The only place I think a positive-only trainer will ever do anything really beneficial is in agility. But agility is already a thing a dog wants to do naturally. So it's shaped, it's rewarded, it's continued. It's not, I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not. I've done it. I've watched Janet do it. I've watched amazing athletes like Melissa Henning do it. It's poetry in motion. It's beautiful to watch. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's not forcing the dog doing something they don't want to do. If that dog does not want to get on an A-frame or a dog walk, the dog's not going to do agility. And that's it. It's just not going to, you're not going to e-collar the dog onto an A-frame in an agility course. If you're doing that, you're a moron and you're never going anywhere. The very, very top agility competitors in the world, Desiree Snellman, a friend of mine, and again, Melissa Henning, Janet's teacher and friend of ours, will never use a correction. But let's get down to it. AKC obedience, IPO obedience, French ring, Belgian ring, Mondio ring, Schutzen, IGP, IPO, whatever you want to call it. I mentioned AKC obedience, protection dog training, police dog training. Am I missing one? You're walking your dog down the street. But I'm talking about more high-level things. I've never seen a positive-only trainer succeed in any of it. Now, there's people who say, oh, this positive-only trainer did some protection dog stuff. More than likely, they started with aversives. They got the dog to a certain level, then they went to positive-only, but they're not going any further because they're not going to get the dog to out on the sleeve. It's not going to do it. There's nothing positive that's going to replace that. So the other thing I addressed as well is, are e-collars and prong collars only aversive? So people will say prong collars and e-collars were designed to cause pain in dogs. Well, if you want to say that, then flat collars were caused to create pain in dogs. Prong collars were actually designed to create less pain in dogs than a regular slip lead, because putting more pressure on a smaller amount of space on an animal, such as with a prong collar, and I proved this with my friend Adi in a video I did years ago, makes the dog respond faster, puts less pressure overall, more pressure per square inch in one area, allows the dog, once taught properly, to use that pressure to avoid the pressure, to escape the pressure, to conform, to get the reward. E-collars, which this other Zak George said is the most archaic tool in dog training. Now, archaic means old, but e-collars are the most futuristic tool in dog training. And I would like to get Bart Ballin on the podcast. I already talked to him yesterday about talking about the evolution of e-collars. E-collars are no way designed to purely cause pain. E-collars are designed that I can communicate with my dog at 100 yards, at 400 yards. I can communicate with my dog. I can give him a tap on the collar. Now, if you're a sadist, if you're a sick person, can you use an e-collar the wrong way? Of course you can. If you're a sick person, a sadist, can you use a flat collar the wrong way? Of course you can. You can use any tool beneficially or badly, right? You can use it for benefit or for loss. But to use an e-collar, you can teach a dog that a vibrate on an e-collar or a low stim on an e-collar means a reward is coming. A lot of trainers will do that early on. They'll start using an e-collar, low stim, feed the dog, low stim, throw the ball, low stim, do this. There are trainers who disagree with low stim rewards on e-collars, but that's not something I'm going to get into. I can condition a dog or other animals. You know, if you want to look at the old, the Skinner experiments, look at the shuttle box. That was a pretty cruel experiment. And for the most part, scientific experiments on dogs, and I'm segueing here because I've got a bunch of notes, but I've really got more of a drive in my head of what I really want to talk about. Scientific experiments are really designed to be cruel to dogs. And let me go through that with you for a second. There was a monkey called Britches that lived in a lab in Los Angeles. I know this story personally because I know personally the people involved. I can't mention the names, but I know them. This monkey lived in a laboratory in the Los Angeles area, in California, had its skull cut away and had electrode implanted in its brain, and it would be shocked with electrical stimulation on its brain in a laboratory in a university that's government funded for years. And that was the experiment, to see how this monkey would respond to shocks to his brain. There are countless rabbits in laboratories that have soap and shampoo poured into their eyes to see if it's going to hurt your eyes. There are countless dogs, beagles, that are living in laboratories that are tortured and experimented on every day to see how that will relate to humans. So when someone takes a group of dogs and starts shocking them on e-collars, because that is the study, how will this dog respond to e-collar stimulation? And we know it's negative, so let's turn it up, let's turn it up, let's turn it up, because there's no dog in the world, 0 dogs, that will respond negatively to a low e-collar stim. There isn't one. I could take the softest dog and put it on a very low, a 1, 2, or 3 on a very good e-collar, and the dog would kind of look around and go, oh, what's that? Similar to tapping on the shoulder. Time for the chloroseptic. Excuse me. But these studies are really set out to prove what they want to know, which is that the e-collar is negative. And as I said, there's not one positive-only trainer who's proven their techniques in a real-world application. So we have to look at, how do we prevent any pain or any stress in dogs? And it's the same way. People always say, oh, would you do that to your child? And people say, oh, would you put an e-collar on your child if they were running into the street? And the answer is, no, of course not. Comparing children to animals is something that is ridiculous to do, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. But you can use separate function. In other words, you wouldn't say, would you put an e-collar on your dog? No, but you can say, how would you teach a dog or a child in a loving way? Well, if your child was running into the street and you said, don't run into the street, and then they ran into the street, you might grab them and give them a swat on the butt and say, don't ever do that again. Or you could have a treat in your hand and say, if you come back from the street, don't run all the way into the street. I've got a cookie for you. Now, if you're that kind of a parent, you're a moron, right? You're really stupid, and you shouldn't have a child. Grab the child and correct the child. Hey, don't do that again. And scare the child. Intimidate the child not to do that, because you're going to save the child's life in the long run. But how do we avoid stressors and pain? And this is, I think, at the heart of this feel-good movement. In life, I'm 58 years old now. I'll admit that openly to you. I've had stress in my life, physical, emotional, mental stress. And through that stress, I've grown. And through that stress, everyone grows. I go to the gym, I work out, I train hard, my muscles are sore, my muscles grow. I go to Gold's Gym, I see people grunting, putting in the hard work, they're in good shape. They're not sitting on the couch eating Doritos and Oreos and drinking Coke all day and being fat. If you want to benefit, if you want to be great, you have to work. You have to work at it. You have to stress your body and your mind. If you want to learn things, you have to read, you have to cram, you have to study, you have to put pressure on your mind to learn. That's the same way dogs learn. Dogs learn through repetition, reward, and consequence. If you want to take all stress away, then limit all experiences, because experiences are stressful. Experiences are pressure on us all the time. Passing, failing, making the grade, not making the grade, making the cut, not making the cut. Those are all things that are really, really important for all of us. What I want to look at also is when people cite studies on things like ecollars, do we really look at the complete study? Like, in other words, is the study very thorough? And I'll give you an example. If a study were to be extremely thorough, and this is a conversation I had with my friend Nino a couple weeks ago. If you want to have a study and you want to see the effects of training on dogs, and let's say you want to use e-collars, you would need to have 10, 15, 20 dogs. They should all be the same age, the same breed, hopefully the same litter or the same breeding type. Everything would have to be similar. For things to be clinical, for things to be scientific, you need to have a similar base. In other words, if you want to study 10 dogs, those 10 dogs have to be the same. The pressure applied needs to be the same. The circumstance needs to be the same. The life experience of the dog needs to be the same. Because if you have a dog that comes from an environment that's purely positive, the dog's never had any stress, the dog has been happy, the dog's never exercised, the dog has never fallen down, the dog has never hurt itself, the dog's never been yelled at, and suddenly you put a slight amount of pressure on that dog's going to respond differently than a dog who's had a balanced life, who's had good experiences, a good upbringing, has been challenged, who's been trained and such. But the studies are never that, which is why I have an issue with so many of the studies, and I don't like to get into studies, because for every study that says one thing, there's a study that'll say another thing. That's absolutely for sure. Science is an ever-evolving thing, an ever-evolving form. But when we start citing it and we start saying, this is what it is, this is what it's going to be, this is what I'm going to draw from it, then you're discounting the whole other parts of science. And scientists are not dog trainers, right? Veterinary behaviorists are not dog trainers. That was a question I was asked in the question from Zak. He said, do you feel you know better than a veterinary behaviorist? And the answer is, on dog training, I absolutely do. But on mental health issues, I don't, and I don't claim to. But if you're talking about a dog that's having behavioral problems, aggression, dominance, misbehavior, not being able to be trained, or anything like that, a veterinary behaviorist probably is not going to help you. Because I'll tell you right now, I've had veterinary behaviorists come to me for help, and Janet reminded me of it last night. I didn't even remember. But I was speaking at a conference, and I'm not going to mention any names or anything to make it even allude to who or where it was. But I spoke to a conference years ago, and before I went there, I was contacted by this person who said, hey, I'm a veterinary behaviorist. I've got this dog, and I'm having some issues. Could you talk to me? Could we meet afterwards? I'd like to pick your brain. I said, sure. And Janet and I sat down with this person, and I went through what they should do to get their dog to better succeed. And they agreed with me 100%. And it involved corrections. So I would say most veterinary behaviorists who actually are honest will say that they can't handle things like a dominant aggressive dog, a pushy dog, a dog that's not doing correct in obedience, a dog that's not listening, a dog that's trying to run in the street, or anything else like that. And if they're only doing it on studies, they're lying, right? They're using clinical analysis in a real world problem. That's a big problem. That's a huge, huge problem, because you're lying to people and telling them that veterinary behavioral science is going to solve a problem that it was never cut out to address. And that's really, 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 really important. these people also will cite the negative fallouts of corrections. So they'll say, well, if you put an e-collar on a dog and correct the dog, long term, the dog will have problems. Well, that might be true, and it might not be true. That's where it's really going to depend on the dog. But I'm going to tell you this much. If you have a dog that has an aggression issue, and you put an e-collar correction on that dog, and if it's done properly and received properly, those are two big ifs. If it's done properly and received properly, the dog will learn the correct behavior. They will learn the incorrect behavior. They will learn to avoid the incorrect behavior and do the correct behavior, because the correct behavior is rewarded, the incorrect behavior is punished or corrected, and they will make a choice. But I will tell you, 100%, if the behavior is not corrected, it will continue to be dangerous. So if you have a dangerous dog and you use an e-collar correction properly, you have a chance of correcting that behavior. But if you don't use a correction and you try to coerce it, it more than likely won't get better. So that choice is up to you. Yes, e-collars need to be used correctly. Yes, prong collars need to be used correctly. But yes, leashes need to be used correctly. And you know what else needs to be used correctly? Food. Food is often used completely incorrectly. Dogs, how many dogs are there that are grossly overweight? That's a health crisis. Obesity in pets is a huge health crisis, much more so than the alleged abuse of e-collars. I looked on ASPCA, Humane Society, PETA, and a couple other websites last week or the week before, looking for reports of e-collar abuse. Because I figured, since it's such an epidemic, since the positive-only crowd is so angry about it, since they're so upset about aversive tools being so abused, that these animals are so abused, do you know that I could find not one statistic, not one report showing an e-collar abuse? I talked to Steve Stoops, who was here. He was a policeman for 20 years. Nino was a policeman for 15-something years in Belgium. I asked him, have you ever had a police report, animal cruelty report, using e-collars? No, never. Which leads me to believe either there's a huge cover-up in the police and the ASPCA, PETA, Humane Society, and everything, or the crime is never reported. And if the crime is never reported, then I really wonder why. Is it because the crime doesn't really exist? Or what? So I talked about the science and selective science, but I want to talk about this one other science. There was a study, again, I'm not big on studies, but there's a Salgirli study that I showed that actually Frank Phillips and I talked about in our podcast, and it showed the three results. One was from what's called a cutoff signal, which is a verbal interrupter, like you telling your dog, hey, don't do that. The second one was a prong collar, and the third one was an e-collar. And they did a study in the Salgirli study, and I've got a list to the studies in this description of this video. The study showed that of all three, the highest cortisol levels, the highest stress levels in dogs are from the human voice. Your voice interacting with your dog, the pressure you put on your dog through your voice saying, no, hey, whatever that is a much greater stressor on your dog than the e-collar could be. And that was a study done with Belgian Malinois, and this was all done with Belgian Malinois. It wasn't done with a group of a bunch of different dogs. Again, they were all police dogs. They were all handled by police officers. And so it was the closest I had seen to an even baseline of reporting. The number one stressor was the human voice. The second was the prong, and the third was the E. The e-collar was the lowest stress. And do you know why? Do you know why an e-collar will put less stress on a dog used correctly as a correction than any other tool? Because it's the furthest removed from you. Dogs have evolved with us over a period of thousands and thousands of years. That means our connection with them is the most important thing to them. Our touch, our voice, our affection, our affirmations are the most important things to our dogs. When we withhold that, either through abuse or neglect, We damage our dogs irreparably. Talk to a trainer who knows the most on training, who knows really how to get a dog to do amazing things, and they will all tell you, the more you can remove yourself from the correction, the less personal your dog will take it. And the less personal your dog will take it, the less stress your dog will receive. If your dog runs out to the end of a property line and there's an electric gate and he bumps the electric gate, he doesn't relate that to you. He relates it to the electric gate. He goes, oh, well, I better not go near the electric gate again. They don't do it. They come back. They get the picture. But when you aversively grab your dog and go, hey, knock it off, or you get in your dog's space, or you see any of these, these nutty positive trainers, positive only trainers, when you see the way they interact with dogs through spatial pressure, through intimidation, through pure intimidation, through physical dominance, through standing over dogs, telling them no, looking in their eyes, when they're connecting with their eyes, they're putting that pressure on. And I saw that on that very famous dominatrix dog trainer from England. I'm not going to mention her name. But watching her work with dogs was, I think, one of the most emotionally abusive things for a dog ever. So seeing that is very, very, very negative. Putting an e-collar or prong collar on a dog and teaching a dog a simple consequence. Dogs clearly learn through that picture. Remember, in science, if you want to cite science, there's two methods of training. There's classical conditioning, and then there's operant conditioning. Now, nobody's talking about classical conditioning. They're all on operant conditioning. Operant conditioning was founded by Skinner. Operant conditioning contains what's called the 4 quadrants. It's extremely confusing to the average person. There's negative punishment, negative reward, positive reward. To understand that's complicated, I'll do a video on it at some point to kind of give you a synopsis of what it means. But to use positive punishment, to add punishment, to correct a dog, the dog can learn just as well as he can learn from positive rewards. In other words, I teach a dog, you do this, you get that. Or I teach a dog, you do this, boom, don't do that. They're both learning dynamics in those 4 quadrants. But you can't have science and just pick one. If the science is 4, then you have to understand there are 4. And you can't say, well, these 4 are cruel, these 3 are cruel, we're only going to take this one. But you might think they're cruel, and therefore you're anthropomorphizing the science by saying, well, this one doesn't work. But it does work. It's the same thing when people try to say, oh, there is no dominance in dogs. Well, of course there's dominance in dogs. There's dominance in all animals. There's dominance in ants. You must understand that science-based dog training is hooking you into a lie, and that's where I have a problem with it. In my opinion, dog training, and this is one of the questions that, that people always say, well, with positive only training, we're going to, if we don't want the dog to run into the street, we're going to start, 200 feet back from the street, and we're going to come closer to the street and reward the dog and get the dog's attention back to me, and then go closer to the street and come back up, and we're going to come back to this. And it's this back and forth. Positive only training does not work when you can't control the stimulus. When you can't control the exposure to the distractor, positive only training can't work. In other words, if my dog is afraid of this bottle, I can very simply put the bottle at a distance of 20 feet and bring my dog close to it, give him some treats, call him away from it. Bring the dog closer to it, give him some treats, pull him away from it. I can put some treats on the bottle, and the dog say, oh, that's kind of nice. There's treats on the bottle. It's positive. Eventually, the dog will associate the bottle with something positive, like the treats, like my affection, and then the bottle is no longer a negative. When my dog is trying to chase a car or a squirrel, unless I have a trained squirrel or a car that will constantly do the exact same movement, and I can kind of teach my dog this pattern, I cannot control that stimulus. Now, here's the danger. Here's why this positive only lie is bad. Because they will tell you that they will, and this was one of the explanations. Watch the 2 videos of Zach and I on my site, and you'll see why it's an issue. My question was, if you couldn't get your dog to learn, let's say not to chase a car, through your methodology, would you recommend that dog to someone who used a different methodology, like a correction? Well, the answer was, I would recommend him to somebody else who uses a humane methodology, which means not eco. So in other words, if you have this kind of positive-only trainer, and this is something I've seen and a lot of people have seen, what they will do is they will continue to promote only their way of training over and over and over again, right? Over and over and over again, they will say, well, we have to remove this, we have to go back, we have to back up, we have to redress, we have to regroup, we have to do this. Where a simple consequence, a simple amount of punishment, I'm going to put it in there, or correction, or discomfort, or slight pain. And I said, if I had to do that, if I had to train a dog to not chase a car or not attack another dog, I would put a certain amount of discomfort, and that might be pain, it might be a slight amount of pain, onto a dog to stop that behavior. And I would stop it. And I have stopped it. I've successfully stopped it, whether it's chasing cars, trying to attack other dogs. I've had numerous dogs. And my videos on YouTube, the free ones, will show you my success in having done it. Some of them, on the first one, it doesn't end, and we carry it over onto the second or third lesson. But all my lessons are there. I don't have any lessons where I say, well, we fixed it later. No, I fixed it on the video. Right? I'm going to kind of go through this quick because I know I've been I want to take a couple questions. Real quick. If let's say they want to ban the e-collar and the prong collar, it's not going to stop at that, right? In Europe, they started with the e-collar, the prong collar, then they went to the slip lead, they went to the crate, they went to everything else. It just went all the way down the line. That's where it'll happen in this country and every other country that you live in. I encourage you, if you live in the United States, be vocal, be outspoken, be fair, show who you are. If you're a dog trainer and you're watching me, support what I'm telling you. Look at organizations like the International Association of Canine Professionals. They have in no way told me to endorse them in this video, but they continue to allow dog trainers to be dog trainers and work on the ethical application of dog training. It's their biggest part of their mission is ethical application. Support that and make sure you know that if this comes to this country, it's going to come state by state and it's going to be legislated by lawmakers. So you need to make sure that if you are voting, that you tell these people, I will not support you if you do this because it is bad for dogs. It's not bad for dog trainers. In fact, you positive only dog trainer, you'll make just as much money, you just won't solve the problem, you'll charge, and you'll do more and more and more sessions, and you won't solve the problem. This is bad for dogs. It's bad for dogs in shelters because shelters are overcrowded. Shelters are killing dogs, in mass numbers because they're not well behaved. I can tell you that from 12 plus years of being in there. Dogs in shelters are not well behaved. I've gone in there and trained them through the use of slip leads and aversives. I would never use an e-collar in a shelter because the people are too radical. They won't allow you, or a prong collar. But I can tell you that by using it, it would have saved a lot more dogs. And the other thing is people are saying, well, we should license dog trainers. And I have no problem with licensing dog trainers, but I have an issue with the way they want to license dog trainers. And Zak said it in his thing, and many have said it. Well, if we're going to license dog trainers, we're going to have to run it through an organization like AVSAB. Well, AVSAB is the American Veterinary Association of Behaviorists, whatever. I don't know, the Society of Animal Behaviorists or whatever it is. Well, that's not a great organization to do it because they don't believe in using any training tools. They believe that you can only train a dog through positives. You can only train a dog through using treats and cookies and clickers and stuff like that. Never correcting a dog, never doing anything like that. If an organization like that controls dog trainer, you will eliminate good dog training. You will eliminate in the long run any powerful breeds, dog sports, or anything. It will be eliminated, I promise you that. So again, my screen is all screwed up here, but Janet, I think, has about 200 screenshots. So let me see what, not a lot of questions? Comments, a lot of comments. Good. Okay, so Sane Hansen, here in Denmark, e-collars are banned and prong collars have just been changed to a shorter prong, 0.8 centimeters. So fight for your rights to use tools. Yeah, and that's a great thing. If you're in Europe, your fight is done. You guys lost. And I hate to tell you this, but you guys were complacent. I've told my friends this in Germany. When they came for your e-collars, you said, oh, no, we don't use e-collars. Oh, no, we would never do that. They're cruel. They're mean. E-collars are the most humane training tool on the planet. Can they be abused? Yes, but not more so than the human voice. The human voice is the most, and the human action is the most cruel thing you can possibly do to a dog. Hang on. Kev Leafy, is that the one? Says, what is positive only? I'm new to all this. My Mally is first dog I've tried to train to a good degree. Well, congratulations to you. The positive only training is nothing like what it sounds like. It's the greatest gimmick name ever. I wish I'd have thought of it. I would have snagged it. Positive only training means in their dogma that you cannot put a correction onto a dog. If your dog is pulling on a leash, in theory, you shouldn't even pull back on the leash, but they do. And that's the start of aversive. Positive only does not believe in the use of a slip lead, a prong collar, or an e-collar. They believe that everything can be conditioned through positive association. That means if you do this, you get a cookie. But they don't show you how to get a dog not to do this. So if the dog is pulling on a leash, you've got to get the dog to stop pulling on a leash. And when they stop pulling on a leash, you reward it. But to get them to stop pulling on a leash, you need an aversive. You need a negative. By the way, one thing I did not mention yet, and it's stupid because I thought it would be on one of my little slides that I made up. In all of my training, if you watch me, in all of my training, in every video I've ever posted, I challenge you to find the one where I don't start with positive training. Every good dog trainer, and I'm not going to say balanced dog trainer, I'm going to say every good dog trainer starts with building a relationship with a dog through positive association and will take that as far as they possibly can before they ever layer the first correction or the first aversive into their training. Got another one? Sorry, I got to just depend on this because... Ooh, it's a question for... that's a long name. The burrito one? Okay. My 6-month-old Mally has always had a strong recall. However, as he enters his teenage phase, he has started ignoring recall off-leash. Will he grow out of this, or do I need to start him on an e-collar? Well, I think you just answered that question yourself. If the dog is learning that by not having a line on and not having you have the ability to correct him, he's not listening. And a recall is a really dangerous thing for a dog not to have. If your dog is running away from you, chasing a squirrel, a bicycle, a car, a person, another dog, or whatever it is, and they will not come back, how will you convince that dog to come back? And I'm asking that as a serious question. If you cannot put a consequence or put a negative on that behavior, how will you get the dog to a point where you can reward him? Because you can reward him when he does the right thing, but you got to get him to do the right thing first. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a man, woman, transgender, non-binary. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, independent. I don't care if you're a Christian, Jew, Muslim. I don't care if you're a vegan, meat eater, hunter, whatever you are. I know people in every one of those realms that I've just quoted, and I mean every one, who uses aversives in their dog training. Everyone. Which one, Jessica? How do you get your timing perfect when using e-collars and prongs? Well, the same way you get your timing great using treats, right? A lot of people, the reason clickers are so effective and so beneficial for people is because it's just click, boom, the dog did something, click. You don't have to go, oh, excuse me, good, or yes, or right, because people tend to incorrectly use rewards in training all the time. The use of positive training, the use of marking a behavior is the most abused of all timing. Because the dog did it, you waited too long, boom, you didn't hit the mark. It's the same way. All timing is the same. It's like music. Well, how do you get your timing good in jazz? Well, have it good in rock and roll and in classical. Your timing must be impeccable. The minute a dog is attempting something wrong, I mark it with a negative, whether it's a verbal marker or an e-collar or a pop on the prong. Or when the dog's doing something right, the minute they're doing something right, the second, that exact moment, I mark it with either a click and a treat or a verbal marker, yes, or a positive. It's the same thing. You must be able to mark positives and negatives. Pat, you're listening to the podcast. You want me to do a book? I'd love to do a book. We just need to find an author for it. Who am I looking at? Positive only trainers? Who? Huh? I missed it. Sorry. I'm going to run a little bit over here. Somebody sent, if you sent super chats during this, I'm sorry, I can't look at my screen. My computer's all screwed up. I'm going to fix it. I apologize to you guys, and I really apologize because I usually have my comments here and I can do this myself. I'm relying on Janet. Thank God she's here for so many reasons in my life, but she's really helping me with this. Okay, Corba 4 says, I put a prong on my girlfriend's reactive Aussie. As a very unexperienced handler, I ended up hurting my beloved friend. What do you think about YouTubers recommending desperate amateurs tools like this? Well, I'll tell you what, anybody who would just recommend you to use a tool like that is wrong. And, for you to just willy-nilly to try the tool, you should have a little bit more common sense. And I'll tell you that if somebody just goes out and buys an e-collar and puts it on their dog and tries it, it's wrong, right? It's wrong. You're kind of stupid to do that. I'm not saying you're stupid. Or, I don't know if it's really you doing it or if you're a positive only trainer getting in here trying to get under my skin and say, hey, look, I abused the tool and oh my God, I'm a terrible person. That tool shouldn't be available for me. Well, I'm going to tell you something. You can buy bleach in the store, right? Now, if you on accident put the bleach in your dog's water bowl, and your dog dies, you're an idiot. So if you use a tool incorrectly, you're stupid. Because the thing is, as long as these tools are legal, this is a big piece. As long as these tools are legal, people like me and other really good trainers who have channels, and I'm not considering myself a YouTube trainer. I'm a dog trainer who spent many, many years training dogs. And the reason I put a YouTube channel out there is to help people who can't afford good dog training. And there's people in the Middle East, and I love my fans in the Middle East, fans from Arabic countries, fans from South America, fans where they can't afford, or friends who can't afford real dog training. I'm giving them this information for free. The information is out there because the tools are legal. I can't show you how to smoke crack on a YouTube video because it's illegal. But I can show you how to use an e-collar correctly because it is legal. If you ban these tools, if you make them illegal, they'll go down the lines of illegal drugs, illegal guns, illegal everything. Making it illegal will in no way eliminate the tools, but it will push them to an illegal point where people will get hurt. The sky is gray. I use positive only methods for everything, but I have a hunting breed and needed the e-collar for recall. I worked with a trainer to do it properly. Okay, so then you shouldn't say I use positive only methods for everything because you don't, right? You use dog training methods. And you know what? What you're saying to me is you conditioned your dog through positive training, which is exactly what I do, which is exactly what every other dog trainer who's on YouTube, who's here telling you a balanced way to train your dog will tell you to do. Everything is, Janet did everything positive with Dwayne. She did an amazing job. On the recall, he went sideways a little bit, wouldn't come back. She used an e-collar. She is the most amazingly trained dog. He loves the game. And I'll tell you something, when Dwayne, when Goofy, when Maya, when they see the e-collar, the prong collar come out, their tail is wagging, they're happy because the e-collar symbolizes freedom. If I take an e-collar out, put it on my dog and shock my dog, well, it would be the same response as if I put a harness on my dog and punched my dog in the face, right? The dog, every time the harness would come out, the dog would be like, oh, I don't want to do that. Use the tool properly. Find the tools, use the tools properly, and you're going to see that your dog will benefit. Is there another one? It's a comment. Let's see what the comment is. Phil says, off-leash training, lots of pet dogs can find e-collar training beneficial. There's a big problem with off-leash dogs versus livestock in the UK. Yeah, and I'm going to have Jamie Penrith on the podcast who talks about that all the time. These dogs are killing livestock, and then the dogs are getting shot by farmers, right? So it's wrong that the dog bit the livestock. It's okay that the farmer shot the dog, but it's not okay that we put an e-collar on the dog to correct the dog for the behavior that could be stopped. So I'm way over time, guys. Sorry, I got an 11 o'clock live I have to get to with my members. I hope my voice will make it. God bless all of you. I want to thank you for all your support in all of this. I mean, there's a lot of new followers that we've gained here, and I want to welcome all Zak's followers here who've come over to see that there's really good dog training available. That in no way e-collar training or any other method of training that doesn't use the label positive only, that it's not cruel. That there is really good dog training out there, and giving your dog corrections is giving your dog the opportunity for love and freedom. And on that, I bid you a farewell. God bless. Give your dog a big hug, and I'll see you really soon. Thanks.